so I'm going backwards now. We just finished the watermelon. So I want to go back to page 29. And I cut this out of my hoop stabilizer. All right, so this is back to those little blocks that we need to do. So we actually sewed them together in this like 2 by maybe 6 inch. Yeah, square. And you're going to cut straight down the middle where that stitch was sewn in the middle. So you're just going to take your rotary cutter and you're going to cut that in half. All right, so now you have 2 sets. And what you're going to do is you're just going to flip one around. All right, and you're going to sew these 2 together, but you're going to use a quarter inch seam allowance all the way down this side. So you want to basically line these up. And what I'm doing is I see the stitch lines there. And the stitch line there. Because you would have trimmed these on all of these, you would have trimmed them on the white all the way around, all right? So I'm leaving that extra white fabric there on the outside. So I'm going to line these up right on the line. I'm going to pin these, and then I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch all the way down. And then we're going to open it up so that we have our squares. All right? And then what we will do, once I'm done with that, we will be back and we're going to measure this and pick the right quilting design. We're going to put batting underneath. We're going to lay these down and we're going to quilt this actual set now, because that's exactly how it's going to go into our pillow, is this square. All right, now I am also going to get my 4 strips of my inner border ready. So you've already cut these, okay? So you have 4 1.5 inch, and you just cut them that full length of the fat quarter or fat 9/8. So they should be roughly, I think, 20 some inches. Yeah. So they're a little more than 21 inches. And what we're going to do is we're going to get these ready to also go down. Because once I quilt this one, we're going to look at loading these up. And again, putting batting underneath of them. So we're going to be looking for some really thin batting. So your batting's going to be roughly 1 inch wide. All right, so you're looking for some batting that's about 1 inch wide and like 20 some inches. I mean, you could do it in sections like Kim does. But if you do have like a 20-inch piece, I would just leave it at 20 inches and not cut that batting down in lower into a smaller increment. So again, we're going to open up and we're going to look at what kind of border designs and how big of a border design you can do. If you have a 6 by 10 hoop, you might be able to do a 10-inch quilting design. So you can do 2 10s and have 2 20 pieces, and the 20 inches should be plenty for the inner border. The outer borders, no, the outer borders are a little bigger, but for the inner borders, 2 10s to make 20s would be fine. And then of course we're going to trim these down, but we're not trimming them down yet until after we quilt them. So that's where we're going to be. So I would go get your square piece out. You want to slice it down the middle, slice it apart, and then flip it one of the sides over, and then what you want to do is you want to sew these 2 sides together. Now just remember that they would tell us to trim right on the white line all the way around. I did not do that. I left it as extra, so when I put these 2 sides together, I'm going to line the one side that doesn't need to be trimmed, the center section, to that white line that we need to trim on the other one. And again, I'm stitching a 1/4 inch in, and I'm going to seam these together and press them open. And that gets me ready for the quilting. So we will be back to do the quilting. All right, so here's what we have. I sewed this together. You can see it's a 1/4 inch seam from the white stitching, from the center piece and from the outer piece. And now I can trim this extra off of here right now to take some of the bulk out of this seam, but I was able to press this nice and flat. Now I like to put a nice hot iron on it, and then I have like a clapper, a piece of wood that I set on there, and I let the wood soak in that heat, and it really helps these lay flat. And that's what I let it do, is I let it dry with the wood sitting on it, so it really gets them flat. So this is roughly 2 by 6. All right, but you really get like 2.5 inches by like 7, because you have that 1/4 inch seam allowance for everything. So you want to get the quilting design. So I went to the block by block, right? I'm doing the scroll because I'm doing everything with scroll, and I loaded up the design that was 2 by 6. Now I'm going to double check that. So here we go, number 3. So I went back to page 4. Number 3 says they suggested on the piece block that you do this patriotic 3 design in the 2 by 6 size. So the 2 by 6 is the correct size. So I went and got the scroll 2 by 6 right off of my clear blue tiles USB, because I am going to just do it all with the scrolls. All right, so I loaded up my 2 by 6. Now I did turn my design horizontally because I wanted to fit in the bottom of my hoop so I don't waste as much stabilizer, right? So I am going to switch over, and hopefully we'll see if the camera will work. And we are going to start sewing and just doing the quilting piece on here. All right, you can see that I am kind of in the bottom of my hoop. Again, I have a white bobbin in. I'm using white thread because I'm doing all my quilting in white. Your needle. How long you've been sewing with your needle? Question, you know, if you need to change your needle up, change your needle up before we start. All right. So just reminders, right, of things that you might want to do. So I am going to hit start. I'm going to actually stitch where I need to place my batting. All right, so my batting is roughly going to be 2 inches by 6 inches. So I'm going to try and find, you know, a decent piece that size-wise will probably work out okay, and I'm not, you know, wasting a ton of batting when I do it. Because it is a small piece of batting that we're putting in here. Alright, so I have this little piece right here. Gonna line it up in the corners. Alright, I'm gonna hit start. Now I'm going to tack down my batting. It should go around the batting twice, just like all the others did. And then when it's done tacking my batting down, I am going to actually trim it. And then the next step will be where to place my fabric. Alright, I did trim my batting up. I'm doing my placement line for putting my fabric down. And you might think to yourself, why am I putting batting underneath this piece block? And the reason is I really want this block to feel the same as all the other blocks on the front of my pillow. All of them are going to be quilted, and they're all going to have batting behind them. If you didn't put batting behind it, it probably won't feel the same. Now what I'm doing is I want to line up this edge right here, because that's the edge that's been trimmed away. The other sides have not been trimmed away, so I just want to line up this edge. And I'm going to hit start, and I'm going to tack down this fabric. And I would probably tape it. That's up to you. Just remember that this tack down line is like a basting line. So if it does get caught up in the seam, you should be able to take it out very easily. Alright, so it just tacked my fabric down. Alright, so my next step here is to actually just do the quilting. And again, I'm doing this little scroll. It's 2 by 6 inches. So it's going to put a scroll quilting design right here on these particular pieced blocks. And you see some of the scroll because of the darker colors versus, you know, being on the white or the light blue versus the dark blue and that pink, the pink grapefruit. Probably see the scroll on that one as well. So there's our scroll. So this is now complete. And what we will do is you actually will trim it right along that basting line around. All right, which is almost where the other stitching is. And this is going to still, I mean, you're still looking at 2.5 by almost 7 inches, right? And then when it sews into place, it finishes at 2 by 6. That's why we picked the 2 by 6 quilting design. That's where it finishes. All right, so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to get ready to do our borders. So we will be back and we're going to do the quilting on the inner borders.